there is another kingdom, and this is a kingdom that you can see. Interesting. So the Bible talks about a timeline in the scriptures, and we can understand that all the way from the Old Testament, there was mentioning of a coming kingdom. Now, when we look at a lot of the prophets and the things that they were prophesying to Israel, and this was God's chosen people at the time, and he called them out from Abraham, Isaac to Jacob, which gave birth to the 12 patriarchs. And then through there, we see when he changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he said, I didn't call you because you were so great and large in number. I called you because you were so small and weren't anything, to prove that I'm the one who made you. I'm the one who elevated you. And so we see that history. And then later on, we come to understand that when Jesus came, around around 4 BC, and then took up his ministry around 26 AD. And then around 29 AD, he left, and he left a church, though, behind when he left. And all of this church eventually would make a way for everyone to be in that spiritual kingdom. That's why he said, I have other sheep that's not of this fold. He was talking about the Jews and Gentiles eventually would sit together in this spiritual kingdom, right? But there's so much that happened after that. Most people don't know that church fell away. It went into what's called the Dark Ages. And we can see there's always been a remnant of people holding on to the truth, but that's why there's so much confusion out here in so many churches. That's why so many people don't know what to do and where to go, because his kingdom don't come by observation. If we could see it by observation, we would have never lost the church that Jesus set up. Now we don't know how to find it because there's so many different people saying, Jesus, Jesus. He said there's going to be false Christ that's going to arise, coming in my name. He said, there's people that say, we spoke of you. We cast out devils in your name. We did all this stuff in your name. And he said, I'm going to tell them, depart from me. I never even knew you. Well, we see that going on today. Everyone's Christ. Everyone's Christian. Everyone is serving God. Everyone is reading the Bible and quoting scripture. It wasn't always like this. There was a time that what Jesus was teaching was unique, and it was on its own. And for you to really have a revelation of who Jesus was, you knew there was people who had something in their heart, because there was so much persecution for even saying that you believed in him, right? But then it became a state religion and everything began to change. Now you really can't see what that kingdom is. Now, but in this time period, the Bible speaks of, you can see he set up a church. I can show you in the scriptures that the church fell away. And then there are scriptures that show us that the church will be restored. And actually, that church that is restored in the earth today. But again, because it's not by observation, the Lord has to touch your heart to be able to see that church. You have to be able to see where churches are that are operating that way and that are actually in his kingdom. This is why the Lord left it this way, where he only going to have people in his kingdom who have the right heart. Because you don't have the right heart if you are into entertainment, if you want the world, if you want to be able to do what you want to do, if you want to not have to do the things required for you to grow in God, you can find the church that allows you to do that, right? But if you really want to do it the way he said, you gotta have that in your heart. And what are you going to do? You're going to be drawn to other people who have that heart, and God will lead you to his kingdom. He said, no one can come to me except he's drawn by the Spirit of my Father. So the Spirit of God will lead a person to his kingdom who really is looking for it. But some people are looking for religion. Some people are looking for entertainment. Some people are looking for a place to go soothe their conscience. They don't really want to change. They don't really want to know what he said. Some people don't want to hear that there's a sacrifice I have to make. There's a change I have to make. There's a commitment I have to make. So we find these microwave churches, right? Or we find these substitute religions that allow me to do everything I want to do and still make me feel okay with myself. But that's not why Jesus came. So even though we see so many options, we have to understand, if we're really looking for that, God can lead us there. And that's a prayer that I've always had, and I hope you have, is I just want the truth. I don't care who gives it to me. I don't care where it's at. I want to please God. I want to know that what I'm doing is something that's pleasing to God. I mean, I have no one else to prove something to. You know, I only got one soul. I mean, if someone doesn't, agree with me, but God does, but the truth does, Jesus does, at some point you have to make a call. You have to make a decision, right, on what's most important. So when you look at all of this, all the way back, even in the Old Testament, it was always speaking of a kingdom that was going to come on earth. Now, this is speaking of the millennium time that has not come yet. According to the scriptures, the church is going to fall away, be restored. There's going to be another church. He's going to make sure people know of that church more on a public scale. People have options to choose, just like they did in the early church. They didn't make people go. Some people agreed with him. Some people didn't. Some people loved him. Some people hated him. He's going to raise that up again in these last days. Then there's going to be a destruction and judgment that's going to follow that. And then the Bible speaks of a millennium time period. And during that millennium time period, he talks about setting up a kingdom. And Jesus coming as a king, it was a spiritual king, but during the 1,000 years, it's going to be a kingdom that you can see. In other words, just like we see the governments of the land today, imagine a time where God's people is the government. And this is what's going to happen for 1,000. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have instant salvation because of that. You still have a choice. People are going to still be able to choose what they want to serve, what they want to worship. But they won't say, I don't know where his kingdom is. It will be clear because he's going to be, this is why there's so much in the scriptures about him governing the world. Now, this has not happened yet, but let me give you some scriptures. Let's look at Psalms 22 and 28. In Psalms 22 and 28, it says, for the kingdom is the Lord's, and he is the governor among the nations. Among the nations. Now, this hasn't happened yet, but this is going to happen. God's not governing these nations today. You could see just complete madness all over the known world. There's going to come a time that God is going to be governing the world, right? In other words, everything is not going to just be able to go. Everything's going to have to bow down to his people. But because salvation is about the heart, you could still choose whether or not, just like today, there's a government that might be in place in America. It might be Democratic one, election. It might be Republican one election. And depending if you're Republican and there's a Democrat in, they're in there. You have to respect their office, but you can still have Republican values and totally talk about them, disagree with them. You don't have to listen to anything they say. You got to abide by the law. But in your heart, you could say, I'm gonna always be this, right? If a Republican gets in, you say, I'm a Democrat and I'm always be a Democrat. That's how it's gonna be during that time. So I want to show you another scripture. Now, this scripture is in Isaiah 9 and 6. And this is actually a great prophecy of Jesus coming. But I want you to see that this was all related to a kingdom. So it says this in Isaiah 9 and 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government, so this is important, the government, so this is not happening yet, shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. See, now look at the 7th verse. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Well, this is a kingdom that people are going to see. The Bible says the mountain of the Lord's house is going to be established in the top of the mountain and exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. And all nations are going to see this kingdom. There's scriptures in Zechariah and all throughout Isaiah and Jeremiah that speaks of this kingdom that would come. And we know that this time period is on the horizon. It's on the way. This is why we see so much turmoil in the world and so much turmoil in the weather. This world, as we know it, is coming into a judgment. The Bible shows there's going to be a destruction, a World War III that we can read about in Ezekiel and so forth and so on. But on the other side of that, there is a millennium reign. And it's going to be a time of peace from a governmental perspective because God's going to be controlling things. But you still have to serve God by decision and by the heart. It's not something that can be mandated.